Alright everybody, this is going to be a disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly of the portals and axle assemblies on a TRX4. I've already taken out the kingpin screws. Be careful you don't lose your spacers when you do. And I've taken off the front diff cover. So once you take off your diff cover, your axles will just slide out with your portal assemblies. Take off your diff cover. Lets you get this far. You have a little E-clip right there that holds your cable for your front locker. You slide that out and you can pull out your carrier assembly, disconnect your cable from this, which you turn it and this cable will slide through the slot. You can pull this back out of your housing if you want to, or just leave it in the housing. I'm gonna leave mine in the housing. So let me get my tub up here. Okay, so my best friend on projects like this is WD-40 and a toothbrush. Spray that down good. Forsake the straw for now. I'm taking my Allen wrench and trying to work the gear or the bearing free. That's not going to work. Okay, so the inner bearing is different than the outer bearing, I just noticed, so you can push through from the inside. Push your bearing out. Sounds like the wife is back from town with her friend. Okay, now I'm pleased with how clean that is. This thing's a trail truck, so it will be getting dirty again. I just basically want to get it as clean as is reasonably possible. Get all the contaminants out of it. This isn't 100% necessary when you get your TRX4 wet, but unless you want to be buying a lot of replacement bearings when they seize, because their seals are not 100% waterproof, this is always a good idea. It just occurred to me that after I clean the parts, I should remove them from the parts washing tub. That bearing feels a little tight. So if you want to take your bearings apart, well, take the seals off of them to service them. Stick a hobby knife at the edge of the seal. Pry that seal out gently. Work that WD-40 in there good. Push the seal back on. Hi babe. Doing a video on the differentials. TRX4 went for a bad swing. Oh, nice. You set that down?
It's for a newer 351, so I don't know if it'll work.
It should. No. Yeah, I don't know. I'll check it out later. You want to see a pile of parts? This is what's left of the TRX4 at the moment. It fell off a rock and went for a swim in armpit deep water, waist deep water. I was in almost my armpit just grabbing the thing.
Alright, well, Joe's friend gave that to us. He just had to put it on his bill through his friend. So.
Alright.
Gotta get groceries out.
Boy. Okay. This is something that I like to do for to get grease. This is just an automotive grease. So I'll use a paint stir stick to fish the grease out of the tube. Stuff it in there. Reinstall that in the housing. Now, if there's there's a chance of damaging the seal slightly when you pry it out because you're using a sharp instrument to dig it out. So what I like to do is keep track of which side I have removed the seal off of and place it towards the inside, towards the next bearing, so I don't have as much chance of contaminants getting into the bearing the next time. So drop the bearing back in there. Take our freshly cleaned pinion gear, roll our pinion through the grease, and drop that in sideways. Okay, there's our pinion reinstalled in the housing, nice and free. Now, this part right here doesn't need to be liberally slathered in grease. The bearings are really free, so what I'm going to do is just butter the gears. Now that will spread itself throughout the housing and make that a lot, or it will lubricate it fairly well in there. Much better than stock. Okay, now the final piece is a tricky piece. There's been a lot of people talking about how they have taken their axles apart to clean them, and then they no longer function. I should have looked a little closer at how that cable installs. I believe it goes just like this. Yep, cable is properly actuating the collar, so I'm going to take a little more grease, put it in there just for good measure. The rear locker will be identical to the front. The portal boxes internally are the same. The only thing that will vary is the disassembly will be slightly different because you won't have steering knuckles on the rear. The rear is actually easier to do than the front. That is not the Allen wrench. There it is. I'm sure there are people who use RC specific silicone based grease. My opinion though, it's completely unnecessary. These bearings are identical to, but smaller than those used in actual automotive and machinery applications. The only difference really is the size, and the seal is a little more precise. So, figure, in my mind, it is as good as anything. And realistically, if it's good enough for a car that will frequently see freeway speeds and can deal with much more if you have a big enough engine, there isn't going to be any problems using it on such a small application as an RC. So, I mean, hell, if it holds up to my F-250 off-road, it will hold up to a TRX4. Now, if this were like a race truck that we're going to be competing against other RCs, just placing that E-clip on right there to hold the cable. Feels like that is properly actuating. Okay, so next item on the agenda, clean the portal boxes and then open them up. So I'm just going to use my, was just going to use my hobby knife and scrape the crap out right there, but it just occurred to me I want to get to that outside bearing. just use my 1.5 mil Allen wrench to remove the hex pin. Pull all the crap out of there. Take the brush with the WD-40. Give this a quick once over. Got my 2mm. You have 2 screws from the front. Let me look at the rear portals. Yeah, the rear portals will be 2 screws from the front, 6 screws from the rear, exactly the same as the front, just on a different rear housing because those don't steer. I need to get a power driver. All the screws on the portal box, I believe, are the same length. So you don't need to keep track of what hole they came into, just keep track of them in general. The 3 that hold the bearing in are obviously different than the rest. bearing is still free and smooth, so I'm just going to pry the cover off. Give it a good spray with WD-40 to make sure that there's no water in there. Blot out the excess WD-40. Take our trusty paint stick. That was beautiful. Pack that grease in there good. Dry our seal. That bearing sounds a little rough, so I'm going to remove this bearing. Oh yeah. This is one of the things I think was clever on Traxxas's part. The drive pin is held in by the bearing. Stuff some grease in there. And put that in, and then wipe away any excess grease. That was quite nasty. Much better. I'm going to save you guys of having to watch me do the other portal box. Figure if you see me do one side, it's as good as seeing me do both. They're identical. The only difference is the length of the stub shaft going, or the axle shaft going into the differential. Once again, gonna liberally butter the gears with grease. Well, that was a little crazy. Now that should be good by the time it works its way around the rest of the housing. That grease is a little thick for this. So a trick I have found for reducing the viscosity of grease, a little bit of tool oil. Okay. Now, I have reassembled and cleaned the after cleaning the other portal box. So, taking out my kingpin screws. The only reason I put them back in is because I didn't want to lose them. I wasn't sure if I was going to be doing this video today on the day of disassembly or doing it much later. So, pretty simple from here. Get your axles lined up, dropped into your differential. Start your kingpin screw and slide the bushing in. Remember folks, you don't have to get these screws very tight. They are just going into plastic. Just snug is good. There's a kingpin bushing dropped right into the hole. You know, make sure these turn freely, and going to check our locker engagement. The locker is disengaged. Bolt cable. And the locker is now engaged. So our locker works. There we are, folks.